Welcome, investigator. Evil is on the rise. Crime is escalating. Our mission is to eliminate the crime by exposing evil, examine why it manifests, and highlight the brave souls that confront it every day. Join us as we work together to bring justice to every victim. Welcome to All Things Crime. Here's your host, Jared Bradley.
Hey guys, Jared here. Man, I am just absolutely excited about this episode. So I am in Kansas City, Kansas, and I'm actually on the Kansas side. We just finished up a conference, the National Sheriff's Association conference. It was in the middle of the city, hanging out here with my friend Jeff Cheek, and he was an officer for a lot of years, and then ended up now he's a PI. And I'll tell you, the reason that I wanted to share this, we are at the site and just down the road, and you'll see here in just a second, but we're at the site of Sarah DeLeon's, where she was unceremoniously just dumped underneath a freeway. And apologize if it's kind of hard to hear, but the freeway was running right up over the top of us. But anyway, one of the things that I want you to pay particular attention to is, number one, I don't care if an officer has retired, if they look at something their entire career, they never give up. You know, the sites that they see, and Dr. Lee Meller actually referred that as the sewer, and it's, you know, that's just all the blood and the guts and the victims and the look on the victim's face, you know, the wounds, all of the filth around crime itself, that haunts these officers, and that's why so many officers have so much PTSD, and but also it affects them. And, you know, solving the case and reaching an end and receiving justice and helping the victims and the victim's family get justice is what brings some relief from all of that stress and all of that sewer that these guys have to go through. So I just want you to listen to Jeff's voice. I mean, obviously the case is fascinating. It's tied to other cases, one in Missouri, and Jeff will explain all of that. But I not only listen to the case and see the actual crime scene that we walked, but also listen to Jeff's voice and just, you know, get it. So I hope you get a little bit of an understanding of what these guys, how much they care and what they go through, because yeah, it's important stuff. So hope you guys enjoy this.
My name is Jeff Cheek, and I'm a former law enforcement officer here in Kansas City, Kansas, and we're standing in Kansas City, Kansas now, in the western part of the city. And this is where I was taken to as a young officer in training, called a cadet, by a public information officer. He would respond to any homicides, things like that, to basically handle any press duties, any media relations duties. He grabbed me one morning, the morning that we came down here we got called on a homicide. There was a railroad car, or a railroad employee that thought that they saw a body, stopped the train, I think backed up, reported it, and so we got called along with the homicide detectives to come down and take a look. So he just grabbed me and said, "Come on, you're going to go on a homicide call with me." So we come down here, and of course here looked like where somebody was taken outside, where the body was taken outside the car. The body wound up resting behind the pillar, but you could tell that drag marks. There was none of this. This was winter time. This was in December, and so it was cold out, hard, gravelly, same distance and all of that. This is blacktop. That's really the only difference. And we've got pictures from back then. This has just been the same distance width-wise. and still a downhill grade, but you can see that there's swirl marks here that look like part of the body, the hair of this young girl had made impressions in the gravel, where somebody probably, it looked to me at least, where somebody had maybe taken them out feet first, is what I imagined in my head, and then when their body fell, they were backed up to about here, so you could see the swirl marks, and then it looked like somebody maybe took an arm, and it, because you can see this like this curve in the gravel. It's just kind of just made like an S shape, or like maybe like a question mark. So it looked like it went from that to somebody pulling on the arm, swirl them around, and then dragging a few feet here, and then they come to rest right behind this. The young girl was laid to rest here. So you can see there's not very many tracks. There's not much distance between here and there. It didn't take that much, but just if you could, you could picture in the. You pictured none of this being. You had marks here, and then it looked like marks came around like this, and then somebody was laid to rest here. Like they're obviously trying to hide somebody from the roadway behind the pillar. There were blood spots along the way from the neck area. So let's just say there's a blood spot here. Looks like there's a blood spot here or something. Just along the way, there was blood spots. Didn't look like there was enough that somebody bled out here. I mean, there were neck wounds to like the jugular. I mean, you know, major arteries. There was no spray. Of course, I wasn't thinking all of that at the time. I was young. This was one of the first homicides I was on. Went to several homicides since then, and I know that when you hit a main artery, there's arterial spray. You can see it, you know, spraying. And you can see there's a lot of blood when someone really bleeds out, and there definitely wasn't enough blood here. There was pooling. It looked like there was some peripheral blood, but it just wasn't enough here, in my opinion, to this day. And even when you look at the photographs, it just wasn't enough to say that the crime happened here. It looked like somebody dumped Sarah's body here afterwards. So the crime scene, or where she was taken from, versus where she was dropped or hid here after her death, is she was taken, her car was found several miles from here, 78th and I-70, under an underpass. There was no blood there either. There was no blood here either, or there either. So there's no signs of a physical struggle and no blood there. Not enough blood here to suggest, I think she was stabbed 22 times. There's not enough blood here to suggest, in fact, there was not even really any signs of any struggle or anything like that. It just looked like it was in the body. And the reason why it looked also like somebody grabbed a hold of her arm was because her sleeve, she had a high school Letterman jacket on, and you could see that she had, one of her shoes was off. We never did recover the other shoe. She was missing glasses were off, which we didn't know at the time, but she had glasses that were missing. But her sleeve was taken off of her, off of her arm. So you could see that it was pulled down, her bra strap, her jacket, her shirt was pulled down. And so that's why it just looks like when you get here, it looks like somebody grabbed the feet maybe to get them out, and then just took their arm and just made like a Superman drag, if you can imagine that, kind of that Superman, and just drug them there and almost took their sleeve, probably completely off, but it was down quite a bit. So that's where you got to think about where we were doing the testing, the DNA testing and stuff like that. But I know that the homicide detective, which I knew, my dad was a police officer as well for a long time. I grew up with a homicide detective that came on the scene that day, and he called me down here And normally I would just observe, you know, I'm in training, so I'm just observing, you know, what's going on. And our crime scene units here, they're taking pictures, all of that. I remember the homicide detective down there by the body, and I was standing here, didn't dare step in any of this. They were taking pictures, and he said, "Hey, come down here for a second." And he called me down there, and I went down there, and I remember him saying, "Hey, didn't you go to Washington?" I said, "Yeah, for a year, I think." But he said, "I thought you went to school," because his own daughter went to the same high school. And he said, "I think I recognize this girl. I think my daughter knew this girl." And he said, can you recognize her?" Of course, I looked at her, and I did recognize her. She was in just, obviously bad shape, had taken a ton of knife wounds to the neck. And you could see where there were other knife wounds. It looked like overkill. I mean, it definitely looked like she had ran into something very evil. It wasn't a hit on the head or, you know, 1 or 2 stab wounds. I mean, it was somebody just continued to stab her. Then later on in the autopsy, they find out a lot more. But he said, "Yeah, I think that my daughter knew her." And I said, "Yeah, I think she definitely went to the school." And I did tell him back then, I remarked, I said, "You know, this place is where a lot of the people from our high school went to party when police would run us off from other places. So if we were gathering in town, you know, probably making too much noise for somebody or whatever, you know, maybe shopping center didn't want us there. If the police ran us out, and I know maybe once or twice I came out here, it was a common known spot. You walked it probably less than a quarter mile away is a common spot that people would go and have parties because they knew the police never came down here." So immediately in my mind, I'm thinking, not many people know about this street. There's not very many people that know this even exists, this part of KCK. It's not a heavily traveled area. But I know that there's definitely a lot of high schoolers that used to come out back in the day that knew that this was a place that police wouldn't come. So, of course, I'm thinking, was it somebody from high school? Was it somebody, you know, that knew that? Somebody that came to that party spot? Was it somebody like that? And immediately, those were the only 2 things. The only 2 things I could think of, the 3 things that I could think of at the time was somebody's going to get a very bad call, a terrible call. Some mother, father is going to get a bad call this morning, and I was sick to my stomach. 2, I was thinking, this is somebody'd have to be completely evil to do the kind of damage to this young, pretty girl that, you know, I mean, just looked like just innocence, you know, like she's not a gangbanger, she's not in crimes, you know, she's not doing anything. Just this, who would do this to this girl? And then the last thought was the location. The location is right next to where people were known to come to avoid police. So what a good place to drop a body. There's been a lot of speculation though since since this case was kind of looked at again as a cold case, that it had to be 2 people dragging a body. I don't think that's the case. I think this is a very easy 1-person drag. The suspect in this case that got arrested several years back was a female. I think it's an easy drag from one female to another female. I'll pace it off for you, but a judge largely dismissed the case against a female that was arrested, that ironically went to our school and ironically had threatened this girl before, had been obsessed with this girl's boyfriend. Logical known suspect, right? Only person that anybody could come up with that hated this girl. It's the only person that made threats towards this girl. And again, went to that high school that knew about this place. It was bigger than Sarah. Sarah was a little over 100 pounds. Could have easily drug her, but the judge dismissed her largely based on the fact that he didn't think that a female could drag another female this distance, that I can almost span my arms, which is ridiculous, and that he thought there'd be more signs of girl fight, cat scratches, whatever that's supposed to mean, like women aren't capable of killing other women, stabbing them to death. There's been countless times when there's homicides you could pull up where they've shot, killed people. You know, females have shot other females. Females can perpetrate other females without there being little cat scratch fights. This wasn't a cat scratch fight. It's clear this was just evil. Let me paste this off for you and show you. This is largely the same. So from here, if somebody got somebody out of the car, you're standing about here, you pull somebody out of the car, their body hits the ground. You're literally 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or 7 paces. 6 or 7 paces. Downhill, you can see the grade, right? So that's downhill. This was small gravel. It would have been more like small gravel like that. This was hard ground. It wasn't a drag factor. We had somebody else that did a show on this. It was a PI, a former cop, and they threw a bunch of soft dirt, filled dirt down and a level surface and did a drag, and concluded it had to be a drag. It must have been 2 people, or probably was 2 people dragging. This was a hard surface. Picture at the end of December, hard ground. It would have been a cakewalk for anybody to drag a little 100-pound girl, barely over 100-pound girl. So between the judge's statements and some of the other misinformation, the case has been derailed. He dismissed her at a preliminary hearing, which is almost unheard of. I honestly can't remember anybody being kicked in a preliminary hearing, because that's only to determine probable cause. It's not to determine what your biases are towards or testifying as a female, as an expert in whether females drag other females, whether females can kill somebody without showing signs of cat scratches. I mean, he got way off track, and I think he referred to it as being an uphill battle for the prosecution. But all he was supposed to do was get in and say, District Attorney, did you get it right when you said that there's probable cause? Because this district attorney had been in the business for a long time. Did you get it right when you said, I'll go ahead and issue an arrest warrant, or I'll go ahead and apply for arrest warrant? Did the judge get it right when they signed off on the arrest warrant? Did the detectives that worked on the case get it right when they thought they had probable cause? Everybody on this was seasoned professionals that knew dang well what probable cause was. They've dealt with probable cause statements in the past. They've applied for many warrants. They felt like they had enough. They did. Everybody got the approval. And then this 30-some-year-old judge says, I'm gonna kick her loose after all of your work, because I don't see signs of cat scratches. I think it's 40 feet. 40 foot would have been over the railroad tracks. She didn't have, nobody had to drag this Sarah's body that far. So, making those statements, I mean, it's just, there's a killer walking the streets, and largely because of misinformation, largely because of things like that. I'd hate to think he's got bad intent. I hate to think that there's something else going on, but it definitely makes the family wonder. It makes me wonder. It makes a lot of people wonder, why in the world would you not let this go to trial and just let a jury of peers? Why wouldn't you let the system go? You know they had probable cause. You know this is the only person that had a motive. Definitely didn't have an alibi. Definitely had the means, had the opportunity. And there's still things to do on the case. You know, we still work on the case, but there's still things to do on the case. There's still more testing to be done, but there's either one excuse or another. You don't have the money for additional testing. You don't have the manpower. You don't have the money. Well, this case is later on wound up being connected to another case in 1994. So now you got 2 homicides. I think there may be even more that are connected with the same suspect. But now the same suspect for here is a known #1 suspect in a second case across the river, again with a romantic rival, again because she was infatuated with a husband. Sarah's case, it was Sarah's boyfriend, and she didn't get her way, and so the person wound up dead. I mean, what are the astronomical chances of that being, of you being a suspect, of us being a suspect in a murder case twice over the same set of circumstances? Your name just happens to come up. Everybody pointing a finger at you being the only one threatening, being hostile, hating, harassing the person shortly before their death. So you can see this isn't a place that the police come a lot. People feel comfortable to drop, big items, big trash items down here. This is a couch, and it looks like a whole living room set. So obviously it still is not a patrolled area. And this over here would have been just down the road from where Sarah's body was found. And this was the area that the high schoolers at the time, my age and probably mostly a little older than me, were known to come down here right through those two gates. And they get loud and cut up and blast their music and do all that stuff. But you knew that the police weren't coming down here to patrol, and you knew that there wasn't going to be neighbors calling the police to come down here. So it's a pretty safe area. So it fits. Your known suspect would have been going to the high school that goes to the parties here, just like anybody else, and knew about this spot. It's very logical that when they panicked and knew that they needed to drop a body somewhere, wherever the homicide happened, that this is where they chose. And it's obvious that she was targeted. I mean, there was a lot of theories about being a bump and rob and things like that. We had bump and robs, throughout the years, but there was something to it. You're wanting to steal a car, or you're wanting to steal something. There was nothing taken from her car. This was a kidnapping and disposing of the body. Kidnapping somebody and taking them to a place where police probably won't be to dispose of their dead body. Now, in theory, she was killed somewhere else. Who knows, if somebody helped restrain her in a car, or if she was already injured inside a car, or what. But nobody does that. It's just, if you're not targeting that person, she wasn't raped, she wasn't robbed, her car wasn't taken. I mean, we just don't really see that. It's just not a thing. Some young girl just gets taken and just their body's disposed of several miles away. And then in such an overkill fashion, they're always going to investigators are always going to look at somebody that knew her, somebody that had a passion, somebody that had hate towards her, somebody that had, really just a lot of hatred. And so, of course, I think the female suspect at first just got overlooked because they knew that there were people coming forward saying that this female had made statements like she tried to get somebody to spike Sarah's drink so she could cut her pretty hair, because she had just really pretty hair. If you're making statements like that, you want somebody to roofie somebody because you want to cut her pretty hair. And just that obsessiveness with her, knowing that she once dated Sarah's boyfriend and wanted him back, and she wasn't there going to give to that. She wasn't there going to allow that to happen. Then subsequently, she wound up back with the boyfriend. Our suspect wound up back with the boyfriend. He neglected to say that at first, but yeah, he admitted now. He'll admit now. Yeah, well, we did hook back up. We did wind up, having sex and all this stuff. So, I mean, it fits the story. It fits the storyline. It fits logic. It fits what a reasonable person would believe, which is really how we base our probable cause statements on when we're looking for suspects. Is what would a reasonable person believe? I believe personally that if you make a bunch of threats, you're obsessed with somebody, you call them, you harass them, you hound them, you are obsessed with their boyfriend, you want to get them away, then you mysteriously wind up dead in some freak accident when you're not living a high-risk lifestyle. You're stabbed to death 22 times, dropped in a place where the known suspect had been before. The friend of the known suspect said the suspect had drove back down here several times, which we know is not necessarily uncommon for people to revisit the scene of the crime, but drove down here, called this kind of like, you know, Nightmare on Elm Street. This is Elm Street. I mean, when you put all that together, I just don't know how anybody could reason anything other than, and then then our suspect winds up with Sarah's boyfriend after Sarah's killed. She got what she wanted. Take that over across the state line, it's the exact same scenario that played out with Diana Alt. It's the exact same scenario. She wound up messing with a married man. She got infatuated with him. She drug him away from his wife for a brief time, got him out of the home for 3 weeks, lived with him, taunted the wife, wanted the wife to relinquish him, to divorce him, to let him go. The wife wouldn't. The wife wouldn't succumb to the threats. Husband winds up going back home, figures out this suspect is not what he thought she was. It's not what he wanted. His words to me was he figured out how crazy she was, obsessive she was, controlling she was. And then shortly after he comes home, back to his wife, the wife was getting death threats, the wife was getting calls, the wife was getting break-ins. The suspect would call and say, hey, I was in your house with your husband, I was in your house having sex with your husband, I left you something there to prove that I was there. All of these things, heck, the second victim even went to the police department and said, hey, my husband is fooling around with somebody, and this girl's calling my house saying she's going to raise my kids with my husband in my house, with my Social Security money, from my death, I guess. She's threatening me. I need some help. They sent her away. Told her she was in the wrong jurisdiction, which they made a mistake. She wasn't, but nobody would help her at the time. She winds up dead. Just within weeks of the husband coming back home, she winds up dead. So again, she won. You know, the suspect won. It's just, and the chances of there being two identical cases like that are so similar, and the number one suspect, you know, that's the common cause is just, I don't know, it's overwhelming. The odds of that are just overwhelming. But we're always looking for guys. Like, they were wanting to look for a botched robbery. Again, there was no signs of theft. There was no signs of a robbery. Somebody was waiting inside when Diana Alt came home on Super Bowl Sunday in 1994. She came home from her in-laws' house, and somebody was waiting inside for her. And when she came in, she put her kids in the living room. She had a 4-year-old. She had one in a baby cradle, a baby carrier. Put her down, the little daughter. I think she went out to the car to get something else, and by the time she went into the kitchen to drop off whatever, groceries, leftovers from the get-together, whatever, then shot rings out, and she gets assassinated in her own living room. And I know from working a lot of burglaries and things like that, again, this homicide doesn't fit a burglary. It doesn't even fit a home invasion, because home invasions will occur when somebody's already home and somebody kicks in the door and goes in, and there's something else, you know, to that. This was an assassination. This was somebody waiting inside the home, had been there long enough to get the husband's gun that we subsequently, you know, I've investigated this case myself, so I know that the gun, there's many people that will say that the suspect had shot the husband's gun. He took her to shoot the gun not too long prior to this, because she was, whatever, interested in wanting to shoot it. And then suddenly the husband's gun, somebody breaks in, gets the gun, kills the wife with it when she comes home, lays in wait for her, kills her, and then leaves the kids in, takes one kid and you know, puts them in another room, but leaves. There's no other, there's no rape, there's nothing else. These are both young, vibrant, beautiful young ladies. No sex crime, no robbery. In fact, they even left the gun in the car. They took the victim's car a block away to a staging area, obviously, where they had a different ride, and left the gun in the car. I mean, who does that? You know, but again, this suspect, by the way, Sarah's boyfriend, who I interviewed again not that long ago, a couple of years back, all these years later, he still remembers that this suspect that he wound up with after Sarah's death called him out of the blue. I think he was even married, or he was with at least dating somebody else. Called him out of the blue 5 years later, however long that was, and told him, "Hey, I just want to let you know I'm obviously number one. I'm number one in another homicide. I'm number one on a homicide suspect in another homicide. I'm their number one suspect." And I said, "Why would she call and tell you that?" And he said, "I don't know. It's almost like she was letting me know that she got by with Sarah's. Now I look back in hindsight," he says, "and it's almost like she's letting me know, I got by with murder once. I'm going to do it again." I said, "Did she make any other statements?" And he said, she wasn't worried about it. She said, "I think they're looking for a guy. They're Keystone cops," is what she said, "and I'm not worried about it. But I just wanted to tell you I'm number one again. I'm number one homicide suspect again." I mean, who does that? And who brags about it? And why would you call an ex-boyfriend just to tell him that? I think he knows more personally, and I think that there's a little bit of fear factor of letting him know, "Hey, you know what I'm capable of. It's just, let's keep whatever potentially secret, whatever, that kind of stuff." That's just my personal theory, but it's very odd that she would call. Most young people, if they were a suspect in a homicide, most people would be scared to death in the first place. Your second time you're a homicide suspect, the number one choice as a homicide suspect, you're not laughing or having fun with it or bragging to people about it. You're scared to death, I would think. I mean, most people would agree that's not going to be a fun feeling. You're looking at, if they know, serving life in prison and possibly connecting you to another one. And to say I'm not worried about it, they're Keystone cops. Wow. I mean, it's a whole different level of game playing, psychological game playing, arrogance. And to date, she's back out. I think the reason, I know the reason, let me back up. The reason that I got involved in this in the first place is because I was laying on my couch, drifting off to sleep, and this was in 2013, and I heard that they were potentially reopening a case in Missouri that was potentially connected to a case in Kansas, and a young girl dropped by railroad tracks. And that memory, I mean, it made me just kind of set up and pay attention to the news enough to say, I know this homicide. And I thought, I had checked on this homicide over the years. It always affected me because I was young myself. This was before I was sworn in as a regular police officer. And it's always affected me that this young girl was left like a piece of trash out under a bridge after Christmas in some cold, desolate area. It was sickening. It made me sick to my stomach. And it always affected me that I knew somebody was going to get a call that I'd never want my mom or dad to get. And now I know I'd never want to get for my own children. And so I just always followed up with it. When I was a patrolman, I'd always go in and ask the detective, "Hey, is there any updates? Do we have any more information?" And they're like, "Well, I know, we believe we know who did it, obviously, but, we can't get the DA's office to sign off on, giving us the power to go arrest." And it always haunted me. But I thought all of these years later, I was off of the police department. I had changed departments, went to another department too. I just assumed that maybe they had gotten it done. I don't know. But I was thinking, man, this is still unresolved. What does that family got to be thinking? It's still unresolved. And then I just felt compelled to reach out to the family and say, "Do you want me to see if I can get somebody to reopen the case? Have you asked them to reopen the case with new technology and things like that?" And so I reached out to him, and I reached out to the brother, Sarah's brother, and he said, I tried, but they won't reopen the case. And I said, do you mind if I try? And of course, there wasn't trusting at first of me. And I said, "I'm just telling you I was there. That's my only involvement. I'd love to see this closed." I know they knew in their minds who did it. I knew they knew that. I had a strong feeling of it. "Do you mind if I approach them? Because I'm sure there's newer technology." They're like, "Yeah, go ahead." So I researched it. I found the MVAC system. I found some other things. I found all of the newest technology that was out there. And I was thinking, wow, when's the last time have they reopened this case and actually looked at it with modern technology? So I called a guy that I went to the academy with. He was the chief of police or assistant chief of police at the time. And I said, hey man, would you have lunch with me and at least hear me out? He said, sure. And I did, and I told him there's some new technology out. Would you please reconsider and open this case back up and try this newer technology on her clothes, on any evidence that she got? And he agreed, and that's where we're at. And now since then, that was 2016, since then there was evidence lifted. It just wasn't enough to use in court at the time. Since then, there's been even more evolution of the forensic sciences to know that there's more that can be done. It's just a matter of whether they're going to do it or not. And I've asked them to. Still waiting. So we're not done, but it's always going to be right here. I feel very connected with the family now. I've spent 6 years with them. They're the ones that asked me to go over to the Missouri side and see if I could poke around and help with Diana Alt's case. So I did. I mean, I agreed to. It's the common suspect that needs to be off the street and held accountable. So the other thing that still to this day, I have to run a business. I got off on Sarah DeLeon's case for a long time. It got me a little bit behind. I don't charge anything to work for the families, so I have to balance work. And I got off onto that quite a bit, and then started investigating or interviewing witnesses over on the Missouri side for Diana Alt's case. And I have to balance making money in the process, and so even when I'm working my day job, so to speak, now, so I can have the money to come in, so I can then turn around and work for the families and try to give the police what I can to help them in the investigation. One of the driving factors, one of the biggest driving factors, you know, whether you believe it or not, is it's almost like it's not just the bond that I feel with the family now. The parents, the kids of Diana's that have grown up without their mom, you know, Sarah's mom without her daughter, without seeing her, you know, married, kids. It's actually Sarah and Diana that if it's almost like I feel ashamed if I don't push, if I don't go that extra mile. Because I'm thinking if I don't push to get something re-examined, if I don't push to try to find out one more thing that'll get the police department more involved, or involved at all, or the DA's office or somebody, if I don't find something, then shame on me. And I just always look like, I always think, you know, I'm letting Sarah or Diana down. I always can picture, it's like I can picture their faces, and they're like, is that it, Jeff? I mean, are you giving up? Are you giving up? Are you done? Have you done all you can do for me? If you don't do it, nobody's going to do it. It's been forgotten about. It's been laid down. It's very easy to lay this thing down and get on to tons of other cases. So even though I take the hits and I make law enforcement mad, my old profession, and I thought that we could be working, you know, together cohesively with, they don't like it. But you know, I wrote a 80-page or 70-some page report that I gave on Diana's case with all the people that I interviewed. Made it as easy as possible. I interviewed these people. They said they've never talked to the police. I think they've got good information. Will you please go interview them? Here's the name, address, phone number. This is what they'll say, a summary. Check me out, you know, vet me. But again, anytime I don't hear something for a long time, and I hear, oh, we'll get to it after the holidays, or yeah, we'll eventually get to that. 6 years later, I'm talking to people that are calling me saying, I never did get a call from the police department. I never did get anybody follow up when you gave this to them. It breaks my heart. And then it goes back to, I think, of Sarah and Diana. I think Sarah and Diana are looking at me like, is this all you got, Jeff? Is this it? I mean, is nobody going to avenge us? Is nobody willing to put themselves through a little bit more, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. I mean, if they get mad at me, if they chastise me, I've been yelled at by the DA's office. I've been kicked out of DA's office. I've been yelled at by police, you know, got into fights with my old friends. All of that doesn't matter. What are we doing for those two girls? They have yet to see justice. Their families have yet to see justice. So that is a driving factor for me. I picture their faces all the time. And I picture this scene down here. I'll never forget it.
Thanks for joining us. Your attention today brings us one step closer to exposing and eliminating the evil that brings crime to our communities. Hit subscribe and share this episode. Together, we will bring justice to every victim.